It's no secret. The world wants you weak. There's a coordinated effort by governments, media, healthcare, education, and more to destroy men of strength entirely. This agenda slowly seduces men into weakness and compliance. They become addicted to comfort, mentally weak, and ultimately reliant on the state. But embedded within the spirit of every man, there is a deep desire to be strong and independent, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually as well, to become the fathers, husbands, and community leaders that God designed us to be. My name is Jeremy Sladen, and I understand the struggle firsthand. As a former professional athlete, I found myself being led down a path of confusion and weakness after my sports career ended. Slowly, I became addicted to comfort. I was sluggish, out of shape, and disconnected from God. My spiritual life was in disarray, and my marriage was at risk. I knew things had to change, and after a big wake-up call, I embarked on a personal reset that transformed my mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. After my own personal transformation, I witnessed countless men trapped in similar circumstances, targeted by a culture aiming for their irrelevance. This led me to launch the Warrior Mind, Body, and Soul program. Warrior MBS is a 70-day competitive experience that has been designed from the ground up to unleash the strong man within you. It includes a comprehensive eating plan, a personally customized workout plan based on your goals, soul-building operations to strengthen your faith, and a brotherhood of like-minded Christian men who are with you in the fight. This experience is crafted from the ground up to help you get your mojo back. Here's what others are saying about Warrior MBS.
The program was amazing for me, just for muscle toning, for overall fitness.
Great diet, great soul building ops, great people you get to meet.
One of the things I love is that I'm surrounded by like-minded men who love the Lord, men who want to be good leaders, not only in their home, but also in the community for which they live.
It's changed my life. I think it has potential to change yours. I highly encourage that you join.
The world needs men who are strong, compassionate, and resilient, and it needs them now more than ever. Join me on this journey and become a warrior in mind, body, and soul. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today on JSlay Made in the USA, where we explore truth, expose deception, and inspire courage. Now, speaking of all three of those things, but especially exposing deception and seeking truth, I've got a phenomenal guest today whose work I've admired for a long time. I discovered him on Instagram, and there's those Instagram reels, which are about 90-second little short films that you can make. And man, some of these things, the subjects that he will pick and the kind of creative effort put into it, you can tell a lot of work goes into these things, but they're captivating. But I think I'm like a lot of people. I'll watch these and I'll scroll the page and it's like, okay, there's somebody behind all this. I want to get to know who this person is, what drives them, how they got into it, how big of a team they have, if at all. So all those questions and more. And yes, we are going to get into some of the conspiracies today because there's plenty to discuss. So with that, JT, man, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on, my friend.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Jeremy.
Absolutely, man. So first of all, what did get you into this whole world of researching conspiracies and making videos? Because a lot of people they research it, they know a lot, but they're not putting themselves out there to talk about it.
Well, it's interesting. I think that probably like a lot of people, 2020 changed me a lot. Yes. I went through like a divorce. I went through just all the election stuff, the COVID stuff, and these are things that obviously nothing that I wanted to happen that happened. And I really was left like, does the truth matter anymore? Because that's what I kind of felt like 2020, 21. And I really like grew up Christian, but I really was just like a lukewarm guy, like my whole life, just kind of like living almost like you're in your commercial about looking for comfort. And it was like, you're building like this American dream, or at least what you think it's supposed to be. And then you kind of get there and you're like, is this all there is? This doesn't seem natural or right to me.
Right. Yeah.
And as the things were, I had a lot of fear and anxiety about all the things that were happening and like the election, like I said, the pandemic stuff, things felt very unstable.
Let me ask you a quick question on that, JT.
Yeah.
So at that time of 2020, were you, because you're describing me basically at that, now I might spiritually have gotten a little bit stronger and sharper based on, like I talked about in the commercial, that personal reset thing. But when it comes to like the subject matter that we talk about, especially you, I didn't know a lot. I thought I knew a lot, but I was more just your typical mainstream conservative right-wing guy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I didn't really understand like these hidden histories and things like that. So is that kind of where you landed as well, as far as political?
I think overall, I think that, yeah, you're like, I had certain, I've been a guy who's consumed a lot of pop culture. I've watched lots of movies.
Yep.
I watched like pretty much every movie. I read comic books. I liked like shows like Ancient Aliens, or actually, I'm plugging my thing too much. Ancient Aliens. I watched a lot of the stuff about ancient the older I've gotten more fascinated with like World War II, World War I. You know, just like, it's like once you can research history on yourself, you find out, wow, history is a lot more interesting than they ever taught us in school.
Yes.
And the more you learn about it, you're like, wow, this is fascinating. So I the older I got, I have got more into history. And so I feel like, you know, God has given me like little pieces of things where when I really started to get it, and I really started to like trust God for the first time in my life, like fully, like needing like full reliance on God, I started reading my Bible again, and I started seeing it with fresh eyes. And I really started to think, like, my brother, you know, he's been serving the Lord for pretty faithfully for the past 10 years. And he's always been about, this is the end times. And so I started really so that was kind of my first emphasis of like, hey, this really does seem like, you know, like some people was like, how could we get to that place? And then of course in 2020, you're like, wait a minute, things have looked like they've accelerated so quickly that you can imagine it now that the whole world is falling lockstep behind a man. And because that's what I really felt like. There's so much instability in this place where you thought like the institutions in the United States were so safe, but they're not.
Yeah.
And for better or for worse, obviously the election, when I'll go and say it, I thought it was stolen. And so I thought, well, so the bad guys won. And I thought, you know, that was such a black pill, but you know, and at the end of the day, it was ended up being a good thing for my faith, because I realized I cannot trust this establishment. I can't, you know, if Trump would have been back in there, I think a lot of us would have rested. We'd have said, now we can kind of like, well, things will be fine until like for 4 more years.
Yeah.
But since he did lose, I had to like really come to grips with, hey, maybe things are not going to get better. Maybe it is coming to the end times. And I think that was basically when I first felt like I was starting to share my faith on my like personal Facebook page and Instagram. I was really just kind of like doing like little Bible study type ideas of like, hey, you know, like things that are helping me. And I felt like God really called me to just start saying things that, like, you know, being more open about my faith. And so I started doing this series of videos. Nobody was really watching them. And then my brother got on TikTok, and he was sending me conspiracy videos. And I was like, I didn't even know TikTok was like this.
This is still back in 2020?
Well, this is 2021. And this is, and this was like, I thought like TikTok was for like 13-year-old girls doing dances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, but then I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. But all the videos I made before that were just, like I said, they were probably little sermonettes, you know, like take a couple scriptures and talk about them. And there was, I'm not sure if you remember, but like at the UN, they put out this crazy statue that looks like straight out of like the book of Daniel. And that was the first one where I was like, hey, look, this matches up almost exactly what these scriptures say. This is the weirdest statue. How can this be a coincidence? So I remember like I had a Bible in my office, and I never made a TikTok before, or at least like that before. And I knew, I was like, well, I can't just talk about this. I have to show it. So like I kind of did this little skit, and I made the video. And obviously it's conspiratorial to say they put this thing out there to represent
symbolically, right?
The beast from Daniel. And so like I made that video, and I had 3 followers at that point. And I think after that video, I had like 1,000. And so I was like, and so that's all I needed, where I was like, my brother was like, ooh, you could do a series on this. You could talk about the mark of the beast. You could talk about like the third temple. You could talk about, and that's what I did. And before you know, I had a Mark of the Beast video, got like 1 million views on TikTok. And then I went from, like I had over 20,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, and then that was pretty much in probably from 2022 to now, I've just done more of it. And like I said, I've expanded out to Instagram and YouTube and that kind of stuff. But I've gotten better at it. And of course, like I said, I felt like.
Now, did you have any video editing in your background at all? Or did you just learn this because your stuff looks really sharp?
Well, like I said, and I appreciate my buddy Brian, who I'm working on with the Ancient Angels project, is that he was a little better at it. But I think that I was kind of just like, I started to make videos, and then I became friends with people who made videos. And of course, I'm looking at their stuff like, how did you do that? Like, I wanted mine to look like theirs, and I got better at it, and I started to understand like, the algorithms and that kind of stuff. But I mean, no, I have no formal training in it. And actually, I'm sure if you look back, even at the beginning of the year, my videos look different than they look now.
Yeah.
Because eventually it comes to like the idea that potentially this could be a profession for me. Cause I do have a full-time job still. Seeking the Lord, and hopefully it'll open opportunity for.
Do you mind sharing what that is? What your day job is?
I'm a contractor. I'm in like commercial contracting, like drywall, metal framing, plastering.
Okay. Out of curiosity, how many hours a day do you spend on that job on average versus making content?
Ooh, you're going to get me in trouble. let's just say,
I'll make the video private to all of your employers.
Yeah. Well, actually it's my brother and my family.
Okay.
But I think that's, for better, for worse, I think through the COVID stuff, people started doing a lot more remote working, and I think with cell phones, you can do a lot, so a lot of the stuff I do are estimates and project management. So like, typically when I go to the office, I'd have to do estimates because I got like all the software there, and but I can do a lot more of the job without being there. The editing and stuff, like, so let's just say if I make a video, a lot of stuff I think when I really started waking up, it was more like I have a lot more knowledge about things, because all I pretty much did when I woke up was I stopped watching the regular TV. I started watching a bunch of YouTube stuff, and then I started reading my Bible a lot. And so like, I was just, like I said, I've gone down the rabbit hole, and I found out the rabbit hole's bottomless, and I have not stopped doing that.
Have you found too, and I may struggle a little bit to craft this question, so be patient with me, huh? As I've awakened and I've learned about all these different conspiracies, let's say in the last, even since the creation of the Federal Reserve, let's just kind of start there going forward. There's been a lot of big hits. There's been the Titanic, the Federal Reserve, and I'm going to miss a lot here, but things about World War I, World War II, JFK, on down the line, you get to the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, COVID, like all of those things. And what I've found is there's this connective tissue between all of them. Mm-hmm. And Christian people, here's one thing that has really bothered me, and I've struggled to explain it to like my family, because they've always been like I described myself earlier, mainstream Christian beliefs, a good sense of moral right and wrong. But when it came to like world deceptions or global deceptions, none of my pastors, none of the churches I went to ever talked about, ever. No, in fact, you'd be considered like a weirdo or unpatriotic or something, depending on what the conspiracy is. But with that being said, what it does is almost like driving Christians like cattle into a system where they're going to lose all of their freedoms because they just hand it over. Like, okay,
or they're going to pretend like these things aren't happening. If I ignore them, it'll just be conspiracies.
There's that too. There's the cowardice piece, and there's also just the naivete and this belief, like you said, that all the American institutions at their core, maybe they've got a Christian foundation way back in the day, but that's just not the case anymore. And so I guess the question have for you is, are you trying to also bridge that gap where you just feel like nobody's talking about this stuff in the Christian community? I'm a Christian, so I want to bring that together.
Absolutely. I think that I rail against it on my live streams a lot, where I'm saying like that the church is not the building, the church is the believers. And for years, like I said, as a lukewarm Christian, I guess sometimes, because I was allowing somebody else to tell me what's in the Bible instead of reading it myself. Yeah. And like seeking your own relationship with God. And then so once you start doing that, you go into the church building and you're like, so I'm reading my Bible and I'm seeing things through the prism of prophecy, and I'm seeing the things through like what Jesus says about it. And the reason they hated Jesus because he told the world their works were evil. So so that's what I'm doing now, where I'm telling them like, but there's the modern church wants to have one foot in the world and then one toe in the church on one day of the week.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to tell you, like, you can't do both. You can't serve two masters. So I think that there's the modern church is, so often like, I'm going to throw my money in the plate at best and hope somebody else goes and does what God told me to do. Like they're going to pass, they're passing the buck, and they're living for the world the rest of the week. And so like, they don't want to know what the Bible says about these things.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, like, I mean, I'm not a pre-trib guy. I believe that Jesus said we'd have tribulation. I believe he meant detribulation. And so like, if you believe the book of Revelation and you believe what the prophecies in the Bible say, do you think that's just going to materialize out of nothing? I think that's what people say. Like, so that's why, like, these are worldwide conspiracies. And it's like, the funny part is, like, as a Christian, we should believe in these things because the world is trying to tell us that everything's random. There's like,
yes,
we're here randomly. Everything's just like, like
the wildfires in Hawaii are random.
Everything's an accident when you serve a God of order who established a place, even gave the devil a list of things he could do and couldn't do.
Yeah.
And then, so like people say, well, how could men possibly do all those things, coordinate those conspiracies? Because it's more than just men, because I mean, because you do believe, like Jesus said that the devil was the ruler of this world.
Mm-hmm.
So if they serve him, and it is demonically coordinated through men, to bring about God's prophecies, God's hardening, just like hardening Pharaoh's heart in order to eventually show his power through the plagues of Egypt.
Yes, that's really good. It's also made the Bible come more alive. We talk about the international bankers, with the monetary system and all that. And we think, well, okay, who's in charge of that? It's the people that love money and greed the most.
Mm-hmm.
What does the Bible say about the love of money is the root of all evil? And you can take that in two ways. The simple way that I was taught was, you can't serve two masters, and you don't need to make money an idol. And that's very true. There's nothing wrong with thinking like that. But I think there's another layer that's deeper in Scripture, and it's saying, if you actually want to know, like, kind of the root of all evil, look at the love of money at a global level. What's going on with that? Because I never would have thought, it's these international banks that are, kind of running the show. But to a large degree, it very much is. Another one I'll throw out is, in my church, we always just support Israel, put the blinders on, like, no matter what Israel does or whatever, we support them because they're God's chosen people, period. Mm-hmm. But we never, not only did Jesus call out the Pharisees all the time, but also in the book of Revelation, it talks about those who call themselves Jews, but are not Jews.
Yeah.
And we see tons of people with great power that say, I'm Jewish. And it's like, you're not reading the Torah. You're not living like that.
Well, no, I think that's, again, that's a very true thing, that in America, Christians have a very naive view about what Jewish people do. It's like, they believe all the way up until the book of Matthew. They don't believe past that. But they believe everything else. No, they don't.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. And that's why Jesus was railing against them. They weren't people who believed what all the prophets said.
And just so we're clear here, exactly. Do you think there are two types of Jews, though? There's the ones that are really, they do want to worship Yahweh. And then there's others that are claiming that name, but they've got nothing to do with them.
Okay, so if this is the kind of show where I can say that,
you can say it.
I will say that me and Brian talked about this once. We put it on our Rumble only podcast about that. Okay, so Noah's grandson, I think maybe it was a grandson or his great grandson, is named Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is at a Japheth's line. So Japheth, so you think about when the flood ended, it came to rest in Mount Ararat, and so Noah had three sons. You had Japheth, Shem, and Ham. Well, Ham, all the people basically out of his line were all the bad people in basically the Bible. Like the Canaanites, the people from Cush, the people from Egypt.
Yeah.
Those are where they came from. And then so obviously Shem, Abraham, that's where you get Shemitic from. So that's why they say it's anti-Semitic to be against certain people. Well, those people are not Japheth's line aren't Semites. So I think that's what they're saying. Like, so when you start to understand, like we were saying, Zionism these people are not Jewish. Like the people who established the nation of Israel, I don't believe those people are Jewish at all.
Yeah, David Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister, he was an atheist. Like he was open about it.
Not based on coming from Judah. Like those people are not. They have no connection to that land. So and I think I finally understood that, where it's like people like the Palestinians, these people who were anti-Israel. I get being pro-Israel because they are a democracy in the Middle East. And obviously if you're taking them over Iran or Iraq, I kind of understand that. But those people do have a right to say that those people don't belong there because obviously the Western countries just carved out that country. And I believe you can look through World War I, World War II, and even before then, that was the goal of these people through these wars, to basically give this land over to these people who, for one, like Paul talks about, you're not Jewish because you circumcise yourself on the outside. You're like Jesus wants the circumcision of your heart. So even if you lived in Israel back in the day, it was never about who your father was. Obviously, the father going from Abraham to Jesus and David to Jesus, that's important. But like, if you lived in that place and you didn't worship God, you weren't technically a Jew. Like, but if you were a foreigner who lived in the land, you were a Jew if you served if you served the one true God.
Yes.
So that's why I say people try to make it like it's a racist thing, but no, it's just a factual thing. For one, the Zionists that's a more of a political movement. Mm-hmm. And I fully believe that most of the people who probably say they're Jewish today, for one, they could never prove it, because like obviously the only way you could prove it is dating yourself back to like Abraham. Obviously that's a long time ago. Or David, somebody like that. Well, how are you going to do that? That's why you couldn't take a blood test and find out who's related to him. Because even you go all the way back to like the sons of Jacob. So right off the bat, I learned like, so Joseph had an Egyptian wife. Moses had a wife from like Midian.
Yeah.
These people so it was never like this clean blood.
Yeah, it would be extremely difficult to find anyone now on the planet that doesn't have a little bit of Jewish blood somewhere in their past. So does that, so if you're talking about bloodlines and all, that's really messy.
It'd be more like talking about like, oh, he's American. Like we would know, we would know that that's not really one homogenous group. And I think that's the same thing. You just think about the Middle East and just think about all the empires. Obviously think about the Nebuchadnezzar statue of the gold. So you have Babylon, you have Persia, you have Greece, you have Rome, and all these people going through this place, dividing the people up, moving the people around. Obviously there's the captivity. I mean, like it's crazy to think that we could pinpoint, oh, this person's this and this person's that. It's right. And I think it's meant to be a subject that's taboo that we can't talk about, because like I said, they're going to say you're anti-Semitic. And I'm like, well, I don't say this because I know somebody like Kanye, says it's the most dumb way possible. And now we can't even talk about it because you just get called racist.
Exactly. No, you nailed it. And I think it's their cover too. Kind of like I remember early on in 9/11, if you around my circles in Middle Tennessee, if you were to come out and say that you thought that 9/11 was an inside job at any level,